Hey, welcome to the Earth Sacred Heart interview series. Today we're speaking to Lyndall, our amazing animal naturopath, about all things a little bit more extreme, like vaccines and tumors and stuff like that for your dogs. So, hi Lyndall, welcome.
Hi Kelly, how are you?
Good. Let's get straight into it. We wanted to talk about the vaccines for dogs and whether they're good or not, and it's a bit controversial. So
Yeah,
yeah, what's your take on whether we should vaccinate our dogs? Is it any time it is
yeah,
good?
yeah. Okay, so absolutely contentious. This is one of the biggest things. If I ever post about this on Facebook, I always get lots of interesting
Yeah.
comments, shall we say. But for me, and this is obviously, I'll be giving my professional view. For me, I actually don't generally recommend any vaccinations, although I do see potentially some merit in a dog, as a puppy, a newborn puppy that gets maybe those initial vaccines. Of course, I would never say to people, don't vaccinate. It's got to be, your choice. But the thing with vaccination, Kelly, that we see in dogs more than we see in humans is that what we're doing with our dogs is we're giving multiple vaccines every single year in a lot of cases, although that is slowly changing a little bit. Traditionally, every single year, your listeners will get that lovely letter in the mail from their vet saying your dog's due for their annual vaccination. So in dogs, it's what's called a C5, and that means there are 5 different diseases that are being vaccinated against. So that means 5 vaccines going into the body in one hit. And what that does when we do it regularly over 12, every year, is that it each time that happens is actually overexcites the immune system. And when we overexcite the immune system like that in let's say a synthetic way, that actually can lead to all sorts of overactive immune diseases such as autoimmune diseases, allergies, all those sorts of things. So that's the first issue with it. The
Can I
second
hold it
issue,
on
of
there for a
course,
sec? I'm
yeah,
just,
yeah.
what is a vaccine? I know that's a really basic question, but like, so for dogs, what is a vaccine?
Well, the vaccines, it's a synthetic. I'm not going to call it. I guess you could call it a drug, a synthetic drug that is designed to actually help the body produce its own antibodies against a disease, potential disease. So, for example, if we talk about parvovirus, which is one of the most common
Yeah, that was in my head,
diseases that dog
actually.
owners are parvo is the big one that people get really nervous about. So it's actually helping to stimulate the immune response to produce antibodies against that so that the dog can get some immunity to that disease. But the issue there, as I said, with that is that it's really not stimulating it in the right way. So it's actually overstimulating it to develop other diseases in the long term. And the other problem with any vaccine is that the vaccines have to be put into a carrier base, much like you would put an essential oil into an oil, massage it on your skin or something like that. So
Yeah.
that carrier base is very much a chemical cocktail, and there are all sorts of potentially carcinogenic chemicals in that base. So not only are we causing this overexcitement of the immune system all the time with the vaccinations, but we're also putting toxins into the dog's body that can lead to all sorts of issues as well. So they're my 2 biggest problems with vaccination.
So
And the other thing, I guess, is
another question on the vaccine. So when you say it's a synthetic way to excite the immune system, so they don't actually have the parvovirus like homeopathy and take it down to parts per million and put that in. What they do is they make a synthetic signature that's pretty similar that tricks the body. Is that right?
yeah, it's along those lines. Yeah, it is very complex to explain, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's just by nature of it being synthetic, that is problematic in itself. Because if you want to look at it like another drug, essentially, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
We know that any synthetic drug can cause problems with the body because it's what we want to remember is that the body is always looking for things that match its own types. So, if we give our dogs natural medicines and natural, whole foods and things like that, the body knows what to do with that. It just assimilates properly. But when we start putting in these foreign synthetic medications, sort of thing, the body's not quite sure of what to do with those. It's not designed to deal with it properly. And therefore, this is where you get this residual building up in the body.
Okay, so sorry, I cut you off then. You were going to...
No, that's all right.
Talk about the next bit.
Yes, it's actually gone from my head now. I'm just going to try and remember as we keep talking. It'll come back to me now. So, yeah.
We were talking about the fact that it overstimulates the immune system, but synthetically, and how that causes long-term problems later on. So the next one was...
Yeah, so the definitely that's a problem. The toxicity is a problem, and that's just come back to my head now. The other thing is that a lot of the research is showing, and much of this research is coming out of the States because we are a little bit behind here in Australia, but in Europe, the UK, and America, the research is showing that we don't need to be giving this frequency of vaccination to gain lifelong immunity. And a lot of these vaccines, particularly one that I can think of specifically is the kennel cough vaccine. Now, that's not necessarily routinely given for every single dog, but a lot of vets do give that now as an additional vaccine. It's often given up the nose. And that has been shown to be highly ineffective. So I've seen many dogs come into clinic that have actually had the vaccine, but they've also had multiple bouts of kennel cough after the vaccine. So, the research is there that a lot of these vaccines are just not doing what they're claiming that they should do. So, and I'm not saying that is in every single case, but it is an issue as well.
So what's our alternative?
So we do have some alternatives. A few years ago, well, probably when I started working with dogs about 8 years ago, typically it was instead of using a standard conventional vaccination, what I would do is recommend a homeopathic nosode, which is like a more natural vaccine, which doesn't have those negative side effects and chemicals and so forth. Works along the same lines. But these days, titer testing, or if you're in American, titer testing is, I just bumped my camera there. Titer testing is, titer testing is more of an option. And this is probably what the majority of my clients are doing now. So a titer test is not something that I can perform as an animal naturopath. It does need to be done through a vet. And essentially, Kelly, what that is a blood test. So what dog owners can do is take their dog to the vet. The vet will draw a blood sample from the dog, and what they do is they actually analyze that blood sample to check your dog's individual level of immunity against those diseases, those vaccinatable diseases. So, for example, parvovirus, they'll actually do a reading as to whether your dog is well and truly covered for that disease or whether the immunity is low. If for some reason that does come back as being low, they can then you can then make a decision, I guess, to boost on that. But I have not actually seen any titer tests come back with low immunity. I've seen them come back as either mid-range or high range, which is what would be classed as normal. And that is not a test that only really needs to be done every couple of years or even every 3 years. So it's a really fantastic alternative that stops the need for you to every year go in and have this have this vaccine done. So
how would they be immune? Is it passed down? Because I know that the mother's immunity gets passed down into the pups. Is it because the generations beforehand have been immunized or have had these diseases and grown natural immunity to them? Is that?
Are you talking about if a dog has natural immunity or if? Yeah, definitely. What you've got to remember, the first thing is that every dog, like every human, has an immune system, and the purpose of the immune system is to defend the body. That's basically what it's there for. So there's what's called innate defense. Innate defense, every mammal has it, every living thing has it, really. Innate defense is that mechanism that kicks into gear when something goes wrong. So whether there's an infection, whether there's a parasite, whether there's a tumor, anything that shouldn't be in the body, basically. So the immune system just, rallies an attack against that. So that's the first thing to remember, that every dog has an innate defense. Now, how well that's working does depend on the health of the dog, but that's a very strong immune defense. The other thing is that, yeah, absolutely, there can be immunity passed down through the generations, depending also on the parents of the dog or grandparents of that dog and how, you know, their health as well. So that is passed down through the line. So there are a couple of ways that they will be, you know, that there'll be that natural immunity. And of course, through really good diet and clean living and all of those sorts of things as well, you can get that immune response really strong and active. Because what I see a lot of is a lot of dogs that don't have a really active immune response, and that's because it's been dampened down through toxins and poor food choices and stress and all these other things. So when we get rid of those, we can just wake that immune system up and get it doing what it's supposed to do.
I suppose
that's an important
dogs lived for a really, really long time before we invented vaccines, didn't they? They weren't wiped out by parvo or kennel court for. So what you're basically saying there is that if they're strong, they're healthy, they're in the right environment, happy dogs, and they've got that immune system's there to create that balance, isn't it? Wow, okay.
Absolutely. And when you have a look in the wild, there's that notion of survival of the fittest. So we do know that the weakest out of the, you know, if you've got a pack of dogs, that the weakest in that pack will be the one that will tend not to, you know, to survive, because it's the weakest animal. And that is just Mother Nature sort of keeping the survival of the strongest, fittest members of the pack, so that they can go on to breed other strong, fit, healthy dogs. So there's going to always be a few animals that are naturally weaker, but that is just Mother Nature's way of keeping the species going. And in the wild, yes, they certainly do have some stressors, but they don't face the domestic stresses of you know, the dogs that we you know, dogs these days in our own lives, where they're getting lots of chemicals and all sorts of other things that they're facing.
Yeah. So, and dealing with our stresses through their own bodies as well.
Absolutely. Huge thing, yeah. So.
Okay, so there's the TETA test. Do you still recommend the homeopathic version? Is that still available?
It's still available. I definitely occasionally order them in. It's not. I actually don't make those ones up. I do order those ones in. These days, I don't use them a lot, to be honest. What I my main focus when I'm working with a dog really is all about the immune system and the gut health. So I'm always working towards building strong immunity and balancing strong immunity with the dog. That's always my key focus. So that is an important part of the work. But definitely you can still get the no-sodes. They're available there to be used, and they're effective, you know, to be used. But these days I do tend to just recommend more of the TETA testing, and I find that's a really accurate, valid test that gives, you know, it's going to give you information. It's going to reduce the need for any vaccines. It's going to save you money. There's a whole lot of benefits to using a TETA test.
So that was my next question is, say if I'm going to go away at Christmas and I have to put Siren into a kennel, I know that she has to have specific. Not all of them do, actually. We've done it once because Siren's not vaccinated. But she doesn't even get fleas. She's like a tank. That dog is so healthy. Anyway, but they just kept her away, which she needs to be anyway, because she's got a healthy body, but she's not very good. She doesn't play well with other dogs. So they had to keep her away from other dogs anyway. So they still let her come in even though she hadn't been vaccinated. But I'm sure that there's people, that's just one thing that's in my head is like, you know, that there's some times when they do have to get vaccinated. So is there a way to, and like you said with the TETA test, if they find that they're low, they might choose to do it. Is there a way to help balance the dog and really return their gut health and their immunity back to really good strength after having vaccines, if they choose to do the two?
So if I've got some dog owners that have assistants or that travel a lot, and they choose to put their dogs into a kennel situation. Not very many kennels here in Queensland or probably in Australia do actually accept homeopathic or no there are a few around, but not many. So in those situations where clients have got have to vaccinate, I offer a couple of options for them. Of course, they can do nothing at all. But secondly, I have a vaccine detox remedy that I provide for clients that are going to have their dog vaccinated. I generally recommend giving that within 2 hours of having had a vaccine, and then a couple of follow-up doses as well. I also generally recommend around the time pre and post vaccine, say a week before and a week after, that I would give some vitamin C powder, just to sort of help with that immune system and just keep the immune system balanced. And that, with the homeopathic vaccine detox remedy, it's a really great way to offset reactivity, but it actually doesn't. A lot of people are worried that it's going to stop the vaccine from working, and that's not the case. It's just actually helping to remove any sort of, absolutely no. It's just really more about stopping that reactivity, because a lot of dogs will react quite quickly negatively after a vaccine, sometimes within hours, sometimes within days, sometimes within weeks. So we want to try and prevent that from happening. Yeah.
Okay. Is that very expensive?
No, I sell that remedy for $20, and it's that's currently not as. I do sell it as part of my leaky gut kit, because it's essential as part of that gut immunity kit. I don't have it on my website as a single remedy just at the moment, but your listeners can absolutely purchase it as a single remedy, and it's $20 plus their postage. So, and that will do. Yeah, we'll do a number of dogs. That remedy. It's only you don't need to give a lot.
Okay. So anything else on the vaccines? One is keeping your dog strong and healthy, like through the diet, which we've already talked about. So if any of you guys watching haven't had a look, Lyndall and I had an amazing conversation not long ago on diet. So that's in either Lyndall's YouTube feed or my YouTube feed, or on Facebook. So pretty easy for you to find that. I'll just put up our YouTube feeds. Okay, so that's mine. Sorry, Lyndall. And
you're right.
Show yours. So yeah, anything else to do with vaccines that you think of that they need to know?
No, I think that's the main thing. I think the thing is just for people to remember that we are over vaccinating our dogs. It is causing problems, and we're seeing a rapid increase in autoimmune diseases, including cancer. And a lot of that, as far as I'm concerned, can be traced back to, in part, the overuse of vaccination. So if we can consider reducing how frequently we do it, or teeter testing and avoiding it altogether, that's even better. And that's what I encourage all my clients to do.
Is there some or a couple of certain vaccines that you would say, like if they're going to vaccinate, that they would be the better choices? Is that even a question? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there some that...
Yes, it is a question, definitely. The problem with it being here in Australia is that it's quite difficult to find a vet that will give a single vaccine. So say, for example, that parvo, the teeter test showed up that the parvo was low and that you actually did need to boost for that. It is difficult to find a vet that might boost for one single vaccine. What they generally will do, if it is low, is they'll just do a complete C5. I know overseas that it is a lot easier for dog owners to be able to just boost against a single disease. But we once again, we are behind the times here, unfortunately. So it's a little bit harder to just get that one single vaccine. As I said, most of the time those teeters are just coming back in normal range anyway, so there's not really that need to be concerned about boosting over for one, sort of disease. So.
And do you think that vets have a problem with offering that service? Like if I was to go in there and say, just curious about vaccines, can I get this test first? So that the people are going to cop a bit of flack. Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah.
Depends on your vet.
Unfortunately. Yeah, it depends on your vet. Unfortunately, you will find that some vets will, like anything, they will have maybe a little bit of a bit of a go at you, maybe. But some definitely holistic vets are on board with teeter testing, so they see the value in it. Some less conventional, less holistic, the more conventional vets. There are some that will do teeter testing. They might grumble a bit about it, but they'll do it. Every single vet can offer this service. It's just whether they're prepared to do it. Some are absolutely on the spectrum of we don't agree with it at all, it's nonsense. Others are somewhere in between, and then of course the more holistic vets are right on board. So we do here in clinic have some vets that we do recommend that we know are really good. Other than that, it is a matter of having that individual vet and saying, well, this is what I want to do, can you offer it? When would you recommend they get a teeter test? When? They can, if you're really any time, but if your listeners have a dog that's coming up due for their annual vaccination, or they're thinking they haven't done it for a while, they probably should. Now is the time to probably investigate that. As I said, once you've had one teeter test done, you really don't need to do it for another 2 or 3 years. It's not something you have to do every single year or 6 monthly or anything like that. It's just not necessary. Certainly what a lot of my clients do if they've got very young dogs, the young 1 or 2 year old dogs, is that they'll have those very early initial booster puppy shots done, and then they'll just teeter test 1 year after that, and then every 2 or 3 years. So really any time is okay for a teeter test. You don't necessarily need to have it done at a specific time, but usually for most people it's when they're coming up due for that dog to be vaccinated again. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. So next question is looking at, I had a lady asking me about tumours. Her dog gets lots of benign, so non-cancerous tumours, and yeah, she was concerned about that. My first thought was that it was the lymphatic system. What's your take on, so cancerous and non-cancerous tumours? Yeah. So in this situation, we're talking benign, so non-cancerous. So what we have to do with that is trace. For me, it's about tracing things back in a timeline. So going right back over a period of the dog's life to see what the triggers may have been. So generally, when we look at any type of cancer, and cancer is a highly complex disease in terms of how it develops. So we probably don't have the time to go into that today. But in terms of the basics, I guess, particularly when we're talking more benign tumors, the body is an incredible machine. It's an incredible protective mechanism. And for any dog, human, it doesn't matter. The body will always try and protect all the major organs and body systems from any sort of toxicity, damage, etc. So in terms of tumors, essentially what they are an encapsulated, mass of toxin that the body has put a protective layer around to stop it from affecting any other part of the body. So particularly for those sort of benign tumors, fatty lipomas and cysts and things like that, it is really the body's way of protecting. It's a little pocket of toxicity that's been sort of encapsulated to protect the rest of the body. So that then what we have to do is have a look at how we can gently detox the body, get the elimination channels, like you're mentioning, the lymphatics, which is a really important part of that. I like to think of the lymphatics, I'm sure you're the same, Kelly, as the waste disposal system of the body. Yeah. So, getting all of that working properly, making sure that we've got an anti-inflammatory diet, reducing pro-inflammatory foods like grains and things like that will increase that toxicity level. So yeah, any sort of cancer state really is a long-term end result of exposure to toxins and other environmental poisons. Yes, there are certainly genetics and other things that come into play. What about what, sorry? I know sometimes in humans, like there can be lesions in the brain and different pockets which are tumorous, but they're actually pockets of worms. Does that happen in dogs as well? Yeah, that can be as well. That can be the case as well. So there can be parasites that are actually have been there for many months, maybe even years in some cases, although in dogs it tends to be more months because, they're a smaller creature. But definitely parasites of any kind can be a precursor to the development of these sorts of tumours and things like that as well. To have that checked out, of course, you'd need to get specific testing done through your vet and so forth. You wouldn't necessarily pick that up just through a naturopathic consultation, but it can be the case
back
as
down
well.
to diet again, doesn't it? Like parasites are there on the ground, they're there to eat waste. So if the dog isn't full of waste products, and they're less likely to have those kind of things. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. I see what you're saying about diet and guts. All comes back down to that.
Yeah, it really all comes back to that, because we are what we eat. Dogs are what they eat, and everything that goes into the gut has to go somewhere. So whether that's in a good way or a bad way depends on what the dog's eating and their general health and all of these other things that come into play. So, yeah.
Okay. And you've got specific things to help dogs detox, or for owners to get for their dogs to help them gently do it so they're not overloading the system?
Yeah, it's really important. I think that detox is a little bit of a fatty thing, and in terms of as my background as human naturopath, I've been on so many different detox regimes in my life to test different things, and I know it's in some cases it can be a little bit of a fad thing. It's definitely a genuine process that we need to engage in with our dogs, but it needs to be done correctly. So it's really important that your listeners don't just jump on Google and try and work out a little bit of a detox regime for their dog, especially if there's something like a tumor or something like that. It needs to be done properly. It needs to be done systematically and carefully, and it always needs to be monitored through a qualified practitioner or a holistic vet, etc. So absolutely, I do a lot of that, but it needs to be done very carefully. And I like to work one-on-one with the dog, because every single dog, like every single human, is different. So what I can handle, you can't handle, and what one dog can handle, another can't. So if we just go in there with the same dose with two dogs, we're going to have two different results, and that's why we need to monitor it. Yeah,
I suppose because their system's already compromised, isn't it? That's why they're displaying these symptoms and sicknesses. Yeah, okay.
And every dog has a different level of sensitivity. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So my next, or anything else on that you want to share that we can share today?
No, I mean, as I said, there are many factors that come into play when these sorts of things develop. A little bit of genetics and other environmental stress and all. I think the important thing to note that it is something that needs to be done in a process properly. I would hate for your listeners to try something randomly, because A, they're not going to get the result, and B, they're potentially going to do harm. So it's important to do it properly.
So my next question was about what she thinks is mites. So they're on the tips of her dog's ears, and they've been there on and off for years, and actually got like sort of pitting in the ears now, and she's had them tested and it came back as not being mites. So, but she's sure they are. What do you know about that?
Look, it may be mites, although the interesting thing with ear mites in dogs, and if we're talking dogs as opposed to cats, it's actually reasonably rare for a dog to get ear mites. I hardly ever see it in clinic, and I hardly ever hear of any clients that have had dogs diagnosed as ear mites. So I'm absolutely not saying that in this case it's not ear mites, but it could be that it's something more along the lines of a yeast infection that hasn't been properly diagnosed, or an allergy issue that's also not been properly diagnosed. The interesting thing with the ear, Kellie, is that when we have a look at the dog's ear, much like ours, I suppose, is that really the ear is only an extension of the skin. So it's not sort of a separate entity. And the same skin problems that a dog might get on its belly or on its rump or on its paws or anything like that can absolutely be affecting the ear. So the two most common things are yeast and allergies. Certainly there can also be bacterial infection, but that's generally in the ear, and you'll see the pus and so forth that comes with that. If it's on the ear flap, which it sounds like in this case it's more on the outside of the ear, then it is quite possibly going to be something more along the lines of yeast or allergy. Having said that, though, with mites, they're quite sneaky little critters, and sometimes you can have multiple ear scrapings done, or even skin scrapings if you suspect there's mites on the skin, and they can come back as negative when there still is a mite problem. So it's important that your your client or the lady that has been having this issue gets this tested a number of times to see, if it's consistently. It does sound like that's what's been happening, that she's had some multiple scrapings done. But if she hasn't, that does need to be done a few times to see. And then not knowing the case, but if I saw the ear itself, I'd probably know more information about that as well. But look, ear mites can be quite difficult to get rid of. There are different things like neem that can be helpful for that. But it's really important that she gets that properly diagnosed. And I suspect, because this has been going on for a long time, that it's probably not mites at all, and that we're probably dealing more with maybe an allergy or a yeast, or a combination of those two things. They're the most common. They're the most they're just so common these days. So also, if her dog has ears that are covering the lovely long floppy ears, then that is also more likely to be something like a yeast or an allergy problem. So yeah,
you're awesome. Thank you.
Very frustrating though.
Yeah. So my next one is which autoimmune diseases? Yeah. So we're going over a bit. Are you all right to go over a bit today? Have you got time, or have you got a client?
Yeah. No,
cool.
that's fine. Yeah. Cool. So autoimmune diseases. Yeah. Well, we've been talking today about vaccinations and this overexcitement of the immune system. So firstly, what is an autoimmune disease? An autoimmune disease is essentially where the immune system becomes overactive or over hyperactive, and where it starts to attack different parts of the body. So it may be an autoimmune disease can really appear anywhere in the body. I'm seeing a huge number of autoimmune diseases these days. The most common ones are around gut issues such as inflammatory bowel disease, arthritis such as rheumatoid and polyarthritis, and other skin conditions like lupus. So it doesn't matter really where it is in the body. Essentially what it is the immune system actually attacking its own tissues. So can
dogs get lupus?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a couple of different types of lupus that dogs get. There's multiple skin conditions that I'm seeing in dogs. Pemphigus is another one. There's a whole range of different sorts of autoimmune skin diseases. There's thyroiditis, which is obviously thyroid issue, gut problems, joint problems. I mean, you name it, dogs are getting all these varied, very unusual too, some very unusual autoimmune diseases. And a lot of that is traceable back to, firstly, the vaccination, because we're overstimulating the immune system too much. But the other thing is that a really major component of an autoimmune disease is inflammation. And if we have a look at diet, such as commercial foods, grains, those sorts of things, stress, chemicals, toxins, etc., all of those collectively create inflammation in the body. So to treat an autoimmune disease, it's complex, and we need to do it. There's a number of steps that have to be carried out to treat an autoimmune disease. But one of the first things is that we want to start to get rid of a lot of that inflammation, start to remove things that are causing inflammation.
So bringing it like with autoimmune disease, so basically it's that the immune system is so overtaxed that it's short-circuiting and not getting the right information through. It's concentrating on one element instead of another. It's just mixed up. It's like, is that what it is? It's just so overwhelmed with whatever that's individual to that animal that it's it just doesn't know what it's doing anymore. It's confused and mixed up, and so it starts to do the wrong thing excessively. Is that basically it?
Yeah, well, that's actually a really good way to think of it, Kelly, because although I always talk about it as being overactive, but the reality is that, what you've got is an immune system in a highly confused state.
That's what I think. I can picture that in my head. That's what it seems to me when you're speaking.
You're absolutely right. It although it is overactive, it is very confused. I even like to talk. I talk a lot about immune systems being out of balance, because a lot of people can understand that thing of, the seesaw that's not sitting balanced. And that's exactly what happens with the immune system. It's really out of balance. It's confused. It doesn't really know what it's supposed to be doing, because messages are getting mixed up. There's all sorts of things that are not that are inhibiting the normal response and normal healthy response. So as I said, it is very, very complex, but basically you're looking at a highly confused immune system that's just really out of whack. So to rebalance that takes time and consistent effort and a number of steps to work that back into line. So,
and are you having good results, like with the methods that you're using? Are you still experimenting a bit? I suppose you would, because it'd be different dogs for different courses, but funny. Anyway.
I've certainly got a set regime that I find works very well. It is really, though, about time commitment for the owner, because predominantly when people come to see me with an autoimmune disease, their dog's on steroid or medication, because we know that steroids suppress the immune response, and that in some cases is required in the early stages. So I've got to also deal with that as well. So it definitely takes at least 3 months to get some sort of stability. To give you an example of that, I've got a client currently I'm working with in New York whose dog has polyarthritis, which is essentially an autoimmune disease that affects multiple joints of the dog's body. And I've been working with Hayes for about 2 months now, and we're starting to get really good results in terms of balance and lots of other improvements as in general health. So this is a longer term plan with an autoimmune disease. 3 to 6 months to 12 months essentially is what you clients have to remember with this, because it didn't happen overnight. So you have to unwind it over time and trace it back and get things rebalancing. It's certainly not going to be a week later and you're going to be fixed. It's going to be all fixed. It just takes time. So absolutely the results are forthcoming, and it's achievable.
What kind of things does it involve? Is so like taking herbs, changing the diet, those kind of things?
I always start with every single dog doing a gut regime, my leaky gut regime, which I have a kit for. I modify the diet, and I essentially in that early first 4 to 6 weeks, that's really all I do, because once I've done a lot of work with the gut, it's going to clear away a lot of the I can see the forest for the trees sort of thing. I can clear away a lot of stuff and target in then on what symptoms are still remaining and what's still out of balance. So then I'll also work to target certain areas with herbs, nutritional supplements, good fats, oils, etc. And looking at the stress side of things is really important. General detoxification is really important. So there are a number of things that have to come into play to get this back on track, because it's quite a complex situation that you've got. Yeah.
So this is a bit more like down my alley, but I'm interested to see your take on it. Do you find that as your human clients start working with their dog and fixing their dog, that their own symptoms and illnesses heal as well? Do you see that real symbiotic relationship between animals and humans very often?
Oh, all the time, Kelly. I think when I used to work with humans, it was always treat the mother, treat the child, treat the mother. And what I mean by that, and it's the same with dogs, is that whatever's going on for the dog is often, the dog is often mirroring what is going on for the owner. So classically what will happen is a client will come to me as a new client with their dog, and the dog's got, say, for example, a gut issue. And we'll get halfway through the consultation and the owner will say, I know all about that, because I'm seeing a naturopath at the moment and I'm on this gut regime, or, I've got these problems here, or they may not be treating it at all, but they're like, oh, actually, I've got the same problem. So you definitely see, as you say, the symbiosis there, the energy connection. And dogs are very good at holding a lot of our things. So it's very, very, very common to see the same problems in the dog that the human has, for sure. And quite often, not absolutely every time, because not everybody's open to it, but quite often I will say to the client, look, I'm going to give this to your dog, but I'd like you to take it as well, because I know that, especially if we're talking flower essences and the homeopathics, that it's going to be beneficial for the, for the energetics there. So that's a big, big thing. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So we've gone to 40 minutes now. So what I'd like everybody out there to know is that Lyndall's got an amazing group of videos, or maybe you're better off saying it, Lyndall, on autoimmune diseases for dogs on her YouTube channel. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe we can, if anybody's interested and found today interesting, they can find out a bit more information.
Yeah, they can jump onto my channel. I put this on up about 18 months or so ago, and it's just a short 3-part series. Each video is only about 7 or 8 minutes long, so it's not too overwhelming. But basically, I broke it down into what the causes were, what are the issues around, what is an autoimmune disease, what are common autoimmune diseases, all of that sort of back information, and then how can we look at treating this naturally. So what are some of the steps that owners can take to start that journey of reversing this, because the long-term answer is not steroids, and that is typically what most dogs are faced with, a lifelong steroid medication diagnosis. So
when you look at the prices, when you look at the price of steroid medication, is expensive, isn't it? Compared to, like, people often say, worried about paying for this or paying for that, but at least if they're doing it with the herbs, that there's an end in sight. It's not like they have to be on there forever. It's about creating balance and harmony, isn't it? Not sustaining. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So this is, although this is a long-term plan, you're not going to be having to do things forever. It is a period of time that you work with the dog to get them back to balance, and then you maintain it through proper health practices. But the other thing to remember when people do talk about the cost, the actual physical cost involved in terms of drugs and so forth. For me, although that's obviously a factor, for me, I'm more concerned about what's the price of your dog's life in terms of quality of life. We know steroids shorten life, and they also have many, many side effects. And a lot of owners have said to me, I don't want my dog alive if they're going to be like they aren't when they're on these drugs. The quality of life is shocking. So I think you have to remember that as well. And that's the beauty of natural medicine. There are options out there. There's another way for people to get through this. And that's what I like. We can solve that problem naturally. And that's a great thing to know, to have that as an option.
That's it. Yeah. And it's about life. So, it's not about maintaining illness. Yeah.
That's right. And so those videos, just as I said, just a 3-part. They're also available through my website. I've got them up as a blog/vlog, and they can be, as I said, they're only short videos, so you can watch them between, while you're having a coffee or something, and they will just give some really good basic information. And then if people need more information, they can jump on and line and just send me an email or contact me and have a bit of a further chat about their dog's issue. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for today. And if anybody has any more questions, as Lyndall was saying, you can get onto her website and ask. You can put ask your questions underneath the video. I'm sure we'll both be looking at them up on our YouTube channels and Facebooks. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a really, really, really big pleasure for Lyndall and I to be giving this information out. It's about all of us knowing more, so then we're more educated we are, the healthier we can be, happier we can be. Thank you, Lyndall. You legend.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. I just love to share information, and I'm really grateful to have an opportunity for people to learn. And, it's so important that we know that when somebody says to you there's nothing more that can be done, that's not the truth. There's so many things that can be done. So just always keep your eyes open to options. Yeah, so did I, because that's amazing. There's always options. Yep. So it's been great fun. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, my love. Remember, everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe and press the bell so you get more information. We'll be, both of us, putting out lots of awesome information for free, just because we're really lucky enough to be connected to an amazing world of fantastic therapists and awesome information that's we want to share with you. And have an awesome day. Bye.
Bye for now.
Yeah.